Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the session on ISO 31000 risk management. I'm thankful to you that you have taken out time today morning and are with me for this session. Can everybody hear me?
Yes,
Yeah,
we can hear you.
I guess. Yeah. So, we are all conversant to the concept of risk. Risk is all pervasive and it is in every walk of life, whether it is on the personal front, government front, or the corporate front. So we have been playing around this word risk for a very long time. And then there are so many standards internationally which have developed on risk. So ISO 31000 is one such standard. It was developed by ISO's Technical Committee on Risk Management, and other standards in its portfolio, which supports ISO 31000, include ISO TR 31004 on risk management. And guidance for the implementation of ISO 31000 and international standard is also there, which is 31020, I think. The 31010 and it shows, it shows you how to do the risk assessment exercise. It shows you various ways. But unfortunately, there is no certification or like we have LA and LI in 27001 and 22301. It is merely meant to be a guidance for the corporate or organizations or anybody who wants to implement a risk assessment within their organization. And risk assessment techniques developed jointly with the International Electrotechnical Commission when this standard was developed. So the latest version came out in 2018 and it provides the guidelines on managing risk faced by organization. The application of these guidelines can be customized to any organization and its context. So the applicability is what is fantastic, and that is why it is becoming more and more popular, because it is not organization specific, and the tenets of the standard can be applied to almost any organization universally. And ISO 31000 2018 provides a common approach to managing any type of risk and is not industry specific, and be used throughout the life of the organization and can be applied to any activity, including decision making at all levels. So within an enterprise, you have the management cadre, you have the middle level management, and you have the shop floor level, where it is purely operational, but it covers every type of risk. So now if you want to just see the ISO 31000 in just one slide. So this is the standard, how they have depicted. This diagram is specifically for the ISO 31000. Now, if you see it properly, then you will see that the risk management process and what activities it entails. For example, at the beginning of any ISO implementation, you need to know the scope, context, and criteria. Like consultants like us, when we visit different industries and we visit different types of, environment and the industry, then we need to first study the organizational context, understanding the business context of the organization. In fact, nowadays we find a trend that when we are doing overseas training also, they stress on our going and discussing with the various business heads who are going to send their representatives as to the what is the business, what are their problems, so that we can incorporate a customized approach to training. So this has already begun and we have already delivered a few trainings like that. So knowing the scope, context, and criteria. Now, how would you know a risk scope and a risk context and a risk criteria? So for every organization, when they set their risk management process, and when we say management process, it is also every person from top to bottom, from management to the person who implements, is involved in the risk process. So it is very important that the policies are set by the management, and policies are always first line of defense. So the management intent is very important. How much risk is acceptable, how much risk is not acceptable, that also is, the parameter is set by the management. So setting the risk criteria, which would be one of the foremost things that you have to do. Once you set the criteria, I say, okay, I will treat risk above the level 3. Okay, so if I have set that criteria, it is very easy for the people who are actually implementing to get the guidelines as to how to implement organization wide. Otherwise, what will happen is, on one side you will use different criteria, in another section you will use different criteria, and then there will not be any standardization of process as far as risk is concerned. Then there are certain metrics, that matrices that you have to set. For example, risk matrices, you have to first of all collect the data, and then tabulate the data in a manner in which you can do the further work. So risk, the matrices or the metrics would show the risk identification. You will show the threat, then the vulnerability, then the probability of the threat happening, what would be the implication, what would be the product of the probability into the impact that the threat would have, and so on and so forth. We will see this in detail later on, but that is how the matrix is. And generally, we make the matrix in uh, either Excel form or even Word form, if you like. So how you maintain it is not important, but there should be some way that it should be diagrammatically represented. Then some people have the spider chart. So now it is not possible to cover everything in this short presentation, but these are the different ways you present the data in a form of a spider web, where you represent all the data for as per your convenience. You can look up in the Google. And Pareto analysis, so these are the ways in which you will represent the data. Because after all, if even if you say you are doing a risk audit, what will it be? It will be collection of information, relevant information, and analysis of that information, and ultimately reporting. So here also the risk management process is broken up into, first of all, the preliminary work, like collecting the scope, the context of the organization, and the risk criteria, and then you assess the risk. Risk assessment consists of three processes: the risk identification, the risk analysis, and the risk evaluation. And after you have analyzed that, you will present it to the management. Again, the management will have the hand in saying that, okay, we are okay with this type of risk, some risk, and we are not okay with some part of the risk. So then you arrive at a risk tolerance level, whereby some risks you will not do anything about it, some you will accept, some risk totally you are avoiding. I don't want to enter this sphere. For example, if I say that speculation on the stock market is very, very risky, then you say, okay, I will never invest, I will never speculate on the share market. So this is the type of treatment, and that again, it will differ from A, B, and C. All may have different views. One may say, okay, I will enter, but I will be careful. Another may say, okay, I'm only doing investment and not for immediate, in forward trading. So this all these three parameters differ from person to person. What I mean to say is that risk is a subjective exercise. My perception of risk may be different. As a risk professional, maybe it is much more than maybe a layman's perception of risk, because I can see through risk even where others can't see that there is a risk. Sometimes I've experienced. So even in common parlance, even in you see a risk. But when the lockdown was just on, I saw a risk of the common supplies are not going to be available, and it happened. Big Basket, any all these stores, then ran out of delivery persons, and they ran out of supplies also, because of the supply logistics not happening properly. So in from beforehand, I had around 3 months stock in place, but I never anticipated it when it should go beyond that. But still, so so this is the risk treatment that everybody gives differently. Now, see, for that, if you see the arrow, There's a hierarchy of control. There's a cost benefit also. So somebody will say, okay, you stock, but you invested in the funds to stock the things. Same thing, organizations ran out of raw materials, but they could have stocked it, but they didn't have anywhere to place it. And the risk was that it could have got damaged, or it would have been unusable. So all these things, as a result, what happened? As a result, there were factories, big companies, they operated only at 30% level of production because they neither got the manpower nor they got the raw materials. So this is the situation. Then financial benefits of investing or taking a control or not taking a control, because you may identify a risk, you may analyze the risk, you may know what is the repercussion, but you feel that that repercussion can be absorbed if and when it happens, because there's a probability factor involved. But if I take a control, I have to invest in that control, and that will not be because there's a probability factor involved. But if I take a control, I have to invest in that control, and that will me. So there are different types of things which you can or you cannot take. Multi-criteria analysis. So this is based on many criteria, and your criteria and your what do you call priority may be different from another industry's priority. So keeping that in view, the broad structure, it merely guides you that you have to do this. You have to make a risk assessment, a risk analysis, a risk evaluation, and maybe estimation, and then go for a risk treatment. Now, this risk treatment can be anything. Either you accept the risk, or you put the controls, or you then simply transfer the risk. Transferring risk is going for insurance, and sharing risk is going for business partners, or sharing it with vendors, or whoever is capable of sharing with the other stakeholders. So sharing, and this is the type of risk treatment we are going to discuss as we go along. And we missed out on one thing, is that for the risk identification, there are techniques like brainstorming. You get everybody in one room and do a brainstorming session to find out what are the different types of risks that I may face in my organization. Based on that, you may make a threat stack. So, okay, so see, because there may be hundreds of threats that may be hovering in and around your organization, but all may not be applicable to you. So sitting in one room with all the other departments and all the people who matter, and brainstorming and finding out what are the risks that are applicable to you is very important. So that is a part of the risk identification. Also, you can make alternatively checklist, interview, Delphi technique, nominal group, causal factors, hazard identification. Hazard is hazard identification, and risk it is risk identification. So, in short, whatever method you resort to, or whatever is available to you, or maybe an application is available to you for risk, you may use it, but the function called risk identification cannot be eliminated. It is, unless you identify the risk, you cannot treat it. Simple. Unless you identify risk, you cannot analyze what danger you are facing, and you evaluate, find the danger, and then present it to the management, asking them what is the course of action that you are preferring to take. Now, this risk analysis also, you can have a what if analysis, fault tree, event tree, bow tie analysis, lupa. So these are the various techniques of risk analysis which are available. And then risk evaluation is risk indices, risk matrices, and in fact, this LRA and LRP is the maximum tolerance limit based on scenario analysis that you can have. Then again, you have key risk indicators, key performance indicators, risk management performance. So this is going to be any ISO is going to be a continuous improvement cycle. So after you do a risk treatment, then you have to do a recording and reporting in the form of a risk register, risk reports, and uh, there will be this recording, reporting, and monitoring, and the communication. They are shown in blue here because they are umbrella activities. Umbrella activities means activities which will go on in all the phases of your risk management, because you cannot say you will do it only in the first section or the second section. all throughout communication with each other, communication with management, communication with stakeholders is very important to build a sense of confidence in whatever you are doing relating to risk, and to make them understand the importance, the priority, and have consensus and buy-in from them. And sometimes even you want sponsorship from them for the expenses on risk that you are going to incur. So it is very important. So this diagram itself is the crux of ISO 31000. That this is the crux, that you have to have a communication and consultation which will be a continuous process. Then you should do monitoring on a continuous process. You have to have allowance for monitoring, and you should do the recording and reporting, because that is the going to be the evidence of what you are doing. The risk register is the first thing that any auditor, whether it is ISO 27001 or SOC auditor, will look for, whether you have a risk management in place in your organization or not. So the risk management process spread into the phases of scope, context, criteria, risk assessment, and risk treatment, where risk assessment again comprises of three processes. First you identify, then you analyze, and then you evaluate. You estimate what is the extent of your risk, and after you do that, you can prioritize what is important and what is not important. Based on that report, management is going to take a call whether you must put a control there, or you have to accept it, or simply cover by insurance. So risk assessment is the core. Risk assessment is at the heart of that diagram, right? So risk assessment is the process of risk identification, risk analysis, and risk evaluation. So it determines what? The cause of a risk event, the risk event itself, and the impact. Means what is the repercussions? If I do a breach of GDPR, what would be the risk of facing the penalty, which is so huge? So what is the impact that I'm going to face? And that impact is the only thing which is going to scare the management. It is going to make them pay attention to your statement, provided they know that the dollar value is huge, what they are going to lose if they do not have a proper risk management in place. So risk identification, risk analysis, and risk evaluation are the three parts of a risk assessment process. Then one of the methods I'm just depicted for short, the failure mode effect analysis is used in risk identification. Now, if you see that what is the input, what can go wrong with the input, what is the effect on the output, what are the causes, how can these be prevented, and what can be done, and which is the most critical, how bad, how often, and how well you can control it. That's the thing you do in a risk identification. See, these are all methodologies which have been laid down over the years, but you can follow your own methodology, your own application, or your own method so long as it supports the risk identification process. You can have a fancy diagram making a threat stack of all the threats that you have identified. Say 20 threats you identified for your business, then you can put it so it will be a diagrammatic representation of all the threats. And when you are into the process of evaluating those, it will be helpful, because then you will know at one glance whether all the risks that you have identified have been considered during risk assessment, and if not, whether you have given a justification for not considering them. Because after all the risks that you have identified in that risk threat stack will also appear in your risk register, because every risk that you identify for the organization, it should have a unique number, and it should go into your risk register along with the other details, so that you don't miss out, and you keep an eye on all the existing risks that you have identified for your organization. And then when I say that you have to evaluate those risks, so what will you do? Find the cause and note the effect. And what is the problem or doubt? Gather information on the problem, search for possible solutions, evaluate the cost effectiveness of the proposed solutions, and then adopt the solution. This is per problem. You can follow this methodology. When you identify a problem, you do a root cause analysis, find the cause, and see the effect, what it is going to have, what is the impact that is going to have, and then proceed to evaluate the cost effectiveness of the proposed solution, and then get a buy-in for it and get the management approval, and then go ahead and implement the solution or adopt the solution. So one of the methods of doing that would be a risk scenario analysis. And what is the risk scenario analysis? It focuses on existing and emerging risks, risk consequences, and risk plans. It can lead to understanding stakeholder activities and communication before, during, and after a risk. Because stakeholders are very important people in your organization. It doesn't mean they are only your shareholders. It can be anybody who has interest in your organization. For example, you are doing the SOC 2 assignment, but your stakeholders are your customers, because they want that your organization must be risk free. So they want certain controls as a third party controls to be exercised in your organization, and hence you are going for that audit. So you have to take them into your confidence, or you have to have buy-in from the stakeholders, and from time and again you have to inform them as to what is the status of the risk activities that you are doing. So risk scenario analysis is one methodology, and it gets incorporated into more effective responses and programs that fetch a higher value. So for a risk scenario, I may give you, okay, suppose there is a fire, suppose there is a bomb blast, and your premises themselves are getting sealed for say 3 months by the civic authorities. Now, what would be the implication of that? Do a brainstorming session on that and say, okay, premise not available means people cannot go. Do you have an alternate place to work? So then also you can use what if in this place and find out what if this happens, then what if we don't have facilities, can people work from home, what about the systems, are they web enabled applications in place? So many things flow from one scenario, and it is very good to have scenario analysis for, if I say the first scenario, premise is not available. Second scenario, your locality is not available due to riots. You cannot reach your office. Third scenario can be even people go up to, uh, finding controls for country outage. You can have a city outage. You can have a your working place outage, and you can also plan for the city outage. Years ago, one very big multinational had planned its city outage, and people they had planned for people to go to Singapore and work outside the country. So you have to have a scenario which you will, so in scenario what you do, you evaluate the risk, and according to the scenario you see what is impact and what is the likelihood. If I say tsunami today, tsunami's likelihood of happening is very low, and it was so years ago also, but it happened. But what was the implication and what was the impact? It was huge. So it is up to you to decide what you want to do. If the likelihood is low but the impact is more, you can insure against that. So that is what most of the organizations prefer to do. But if the impact is high and the likelihood is also high, then you have no other option but to take controls and mitigate the risk. So let us take some examples, briefly given two scenarios. Large wire transfer fraud. So financial institution experiences a significant monetary loss from a fraudulent transfer induced by a cyber attack. So criminals steal funds with the help of an insider who facilitates placing malware within the environment. They conduct successful internal social engineering to orchestrate large transfers from the institution to accounts controlled by the criminals. Now, this again, you mind well, why could it happen? Because your systems were not resilient. Your people could be bribed, and your people did the connivance of helping the fraudsters to place the malware in the system. So that is why it happened. So when you see this scenario, you know exactly, you can do a root cause analysis also, and you can also seek in future, for the future, what controls you need to take. A ratings agency is compromised and the attacker steals sensitive data about rated companies and other financial institutions, as well as agencies' emails and other internal documents. The attackers publicly release the incriminating emails, documents, and select company information after a failed extortion attempt, because they tried to blackmail the company, but company did not pay up. So they, just to take revenge, they published the information. The incriminating emails call into question the authenticity of the agency's ratings, with accusations of quid pro quo deals for good ratings by rated organizations. So see, all these things, the organization is to be blamed because they could not safeguard their systems. And here again, if we think about in the stealing of the emails and the data, which is the personal data of the people, like emails and all, then they would go for a long fine, as far as if the GDPR at all is involved. And now with the PDPB coming in, even in India, there are going to be very stringent laws against privacy, about privacy, and then the organizations are going to face a hell of a problem complying with these laws, and they have to make security has to be the buzzword for the at least for the next 30-40 years to come. So now, having said that, having got a glimpse of exactly, the broader picture of how, then how do you start implementation of 31,000? So focus on organizations' key objectives to ascertain the targets and requirements of proposed risk management system. So everything begins with the core, right? So your organization has a core of the plethora of objectives already defined. So you cannot go against those objectives. So you have to keep those objectives, the mission, the vision, everything in place, and then only formulate your proposed risk management system. Assess current governance structure, because governance structure is very important. Governance structure is how management runs the organization. And you will see that every organization, when you enter, you will have a brief idea about the culture of the organization, how risk savvy they are, or what is the control structure. If you find that everything is going, I mean, you discover that the hierarchy is being followed, everybody is in work is in, they are doing as per their uh, job description, there is no conflict, there is segregation of duties, so you immediately come to know that yes, this is a well managed organization. So the culture of risk also is like that, that risk culture has to be inculcated within the culture of the organization, because it is people all the way. People make technology, people run technology, and people work in that environment, and they have to be aware of the risks involved. A simple thing like password sharing, even in core banking, has led to crores of rupees of fraud being happening in the banking industry, because the lady wants to go a little early because of family ties, and she has shared her password with the colleague, who says no problem, I will do the EOD for you. But in the meantime, what other damage he has done can only come to light after the big fraud comes into light. Because for some time, the fraud may not even get detected. You know? So this is the situation. And define the level of commitment. So meaning to say that when we talk about a risk management system, that it has to be a top down approach. It has to begin with the management policies, management procedures, and the management has to be serious. They should lead by example, and they have to be serious about the implementation of it. They have to be supported, and they have to provide both the resources which are required as well as the people committed to the risk. So then the next step is describe what resources will be allocated to implement or maintain a risk management system. And as we all know that risks are ever increasing. because security is an ever evolving phenomena. What is secure today may not be secure tomorrow. We have new risks coming from cloud, from because hackers are becoming smarter and smarter. The hacking tools are being shared in the organization. So uh, things are getting more and more severe, and with global transactions happening, and maybe I'm sitting here, I'm working for US or UK, and all those security transborder things are coming into picture, so it is becoming more and more complex. So some risks are related to management because they don't have proper policies, and some risks are related to implementation because they are not implemented properly, so that people are not aware what the policies are sometimes, and hence the trust is on how to publicize the risk policies so that everybody is at least aware, at least have once in a year have the risk training for your employees so that they are updated with all the new risks that the organization is facing. What are the reputation risks faced by the, what are the supply chain risks, and what are the regulatory and legislative risks. So for ISO 31000, the NXL components have been grouped into components that consider scope and design, and components that consider control and develop features of a management system. So the entire ISO management system is divided into risk management framework, that is the top level of management, risk management principles evolving from the framework, and ultimately the risk management process being implemented. So there are 8 principles of ISO 31000. Framework and processes should be customized and proportionate. Customized to the organization, customized to your management philosophy, and customized to the best practices prevalent in that country. Appropriate and timely involvement of stakeholders from the beginning, because stakeholders are important. Adoption of a structured and comprehensive approach. So you may not leave out some area which is crucial in your organization. Then interweave the risk management into organizational activities. So you have to correlate with what is the business of the organization. Everything which you are going to do is should be associated and linked in some way to the bottom line and those activities that are going to matter for the organization. The raw material anticipation anticipates, detects, sorry, raw material, the risk management. So what it should do? Anticipates, detects, acknowledge, and respond to change. So again, just as we have change management in the system development life cycle, you have to have a change management because constantly new risks are emerging. So you have to register those risks in your risk register as well. You have to detect those risks, acknowledge and register, and also provide for their response, risk response. Risk management explicitly considers any limitations of available information. Human and cultural factors influence all aspects of risk management because, as I said, people all the way. I don't neglect people anytime because people make the system, people can break the system, as in the earlier example you have seen that it was only through the connivance of the insider that the malware was planted in the system. So risk management, so continuous development of the people resource is very important. Risk management is continually improved through learning and experience, and that is true for all the ISO, all or every type of ISO. Continuous improvement is always at the end, so it is there. So what are the advantages of adopting a proactive risk management approach? Since the risk associated with different strategic options will be fully analyzed, it will be better strategic decision. So you are in by your risk management exercise, you are involving people from top, the stakeholders, and the resultant system definitely will result in better decision making. Due weightage given to tactics and risk involved in the alternatives available, enhance the operations events that can cause the disruption and identify them. Compliance, the risks associated with failure to achieve compliance. As I said in that example, that if the personal data was compromised, and then if you are still liable for GDPR, then you are done. Sometimes your very business continuity may be at stake because of that. So it's very important to see that compliance to legal, regulatory, and other things are there, and the compliance risk therefore is a very important element in your risk stack. And stakeholder, so as I said, they are not just your shareholders. They can be lenders, suppliers, community, society, customers, government, employees. Everybody is your stakeholder in one form or the other. And the organizations must take full account of the risks that cause non-compliance with statutory obligations. Because you know very well, non-compliance to statutory obligations always result in some fine or the other, which is directly involved with a uh, financial loss. Disruption and inefficiency within the operation, late delivery of projects, failure to deliver promised strategy. So all these factors may affect your stakeholders. So what are the principles of risk management? So the risk management to be proportionate to the level of risk phase, aligned with other activities that we have seen, must adopt a comprehensive approach to be fully effective. See now, you see that ISO 27001, you can select your scope. You can say that, okay, I only want my data center to be compliant. But here in a risk management, you can't do that. You must have a comprehensive approach to risk management. Then there should be, as I said, the culture has to be embedded and integrated in your risk management. And it should be dynamic, constantly changing and adapting to changing needs. All of a sudden, COVID-19 has come. So you must be resilient to some extent to see that you can cope up. You say, okay, we can work from home. Okay, we can enable, VPN connectivity, or so all these alternatives, if you have planned, then only you can roll out during emergency. Because what happens during emergency, the mind doesn't work properly. You get panicky. And hence, it is always good to have a planned risk management system. So you know, okay, this has happened. What is the scenario? That, okay, I can't go to office. So now what is the recourse that I have? I can do this. So fallbacks, arrangements, and things should be planned in advance. And that is all about risk management. And what is the risk management architecture? Committee structure and terms of reference. So risk committee should be there, roles and responsibilities should be defined, internal reporting requirements be there, external reporting controls should be there, risk management assurance arrangements should be there. So all these together make the architecture for your company, and it has to be uh, what do you call customized to your organization, to your needs. Don't do over, don't spend over unless it is necessary for your organization. You have to prioritize your most important risks. And if it involves too much of an expenditure, you can roll it out in between 1 or 2 years. Heavens will not fall down, but you have to do it. You cannot avoid doing a risk management strategy, or you can say a risk treatment strategy for long. You cannot delay it, because you never know when the risk might hit you badly. So instead of saving money on the control, sometimes it is good to have the control so that you don't spend much more money when the risk materializes. So risk strategy, of course, dependent on management philosophy, embedding risk management, risk appetite and attitude to risk, benchmark test for significance. Benchmark tests, what are others in this industry doing? Statements and policies, assessment techniques that are there. You can adopt any of the techniques, or you can adopt a software for risk priorities for the present year. And of course, what are protocols? Rules for action, right? We had this typical word protocol in telecommunication, where I said protocols are rules for telecommunication, rules for communication. And like any other field, protocol should be followed in risk management also. The rules have to be followed. The tools and techniques, whatever you are using, have to be used. Risk classification has to be done. You can make an ABC classification also, the most important risk, then the middle level risk, and the low level risk. Then the thing is that if you have high level risk, it will have high priority. But the minute you start treating those high level risks, what will happen is that the severity of the risk comes down. If you have a control, you have a the probability goes down, and hence the high level risk can be reduced to a medium level or low level risk. And that low level risk is what is the acceptable level of risk or your tolerable risk. Or maybe, so that threshold of low, medium, high, you have to fine tune it, and you have to adjust it accordingly and keep on changing when changes take place. You have to do the change management as well. So risk classification into high level, medium level, low level risk, and again risk assessment procedures, which can be qualitative as well as quantitative, risk control rules and procedures, responding to incident issues and events, documentation and record keeping. Most of the organizations today prefer a qualitative approach because it is not very easy for people to quantify how much they are going to lose when, because to estimate risk is a highly complex thing. Again, it is a subjective thing. So it is better that you say high, medium, low, and then collate the facts received from each individual if it is a checklist, and find out what is applicable of high, medium, low. Again, if you are wanting a quantitative to convert that, or you want a mixed thing, then what you can do is you can put high level, low as probability, and you can put a dollar value. Okay, tsunami, then 10 crores. Okay, and then have some formula that you formulate in house, and find out that 10 crores multiplied by the probability of occurrence can be used or not. So such mixed things you can do for your organization, but most of the organization, they put it on a level of high, medium, low, so that they can compare. And when they come with the last column as high, then the question of mitigating that risk comes into picture. And when the risk mitigation takes place, that means your risk becomes lower. So high can become medium and medium can become low. And that is the, after all controls are put, what is the definition of residual risk? After all controls are put, the risk that remains is the residual risk. And that is mostly the risk that organization accept, or it is tolerable, or it's an acceptable level of risk. Further, they will not do anything about it. That is the residual risk. And in your risk register also, it will appear as a residual risk. Responding to incidents, documentation and record keeping, always there, risk register is there, risk reports are there, training and communication at least once a year, audit procedures, that is going to be, because the minute you are certified in some security standard, the regular surveillance audits also will take place, reporting and disclosure and certification. But there is no certification as far as ISO 31000 is concerned. It is serving in the place of a guideline. And if at all the ISO 31000 the courses that are there, they will give you as a ISO 31000 risk manager, which I'm having, but not LA or LI. So, understanding the context of the organization, we have already discussed purpose, scope of risk management activity, external, internal, and risk management context, risk criteria, risk appetite. So, risk appetite is nothing as your tolerable limit, what you can take and what you cannot take. So nature of risk faced by organization, they can be variable cost or availability of raw material, cost of retirement, pension, social benefits, increasing importance of intellectual property. So now intellectual property is a asset. If you have intellectual property, you should know how to safeguard it, what can go wrong, how people can misuse, greater supply chain and joint venture dependency. You have dependencies on vendors, you have dependencies on people. So that also comes in the purview of risk. Reputation risk is the highest because customer centric environments we are having. Regulatory pressures and legislative requirements, ever increasing regulatory pressures from the regulators like RBI, SEBI, and the IRDA. Volatile markets, increased competition, global market. Now we can say we are going towards globalization, product innovation, rapid changes within the product, threats to national economies, terrorism, potential for international organized crime and increased political risks are there, extreme weather events. So even that is catching up on us. So from all quarters, the risks are going to be there and they are going to be to your business. Only thing is that you have to have a proper protective shield so that you are resilient. So if you have an umbrella, you have an limited exposure, but if you wear a raincoat, you are protected from all sides, isn't it? So that is the analogy I always give, that the raincoat is better because you are absolutely protected against rain sometimes. So you, from all quarters, from suppliers, um, from the, even sometimes a change of government is a risk, a change of regulator, legislation, then even product innovation, obsolescence, all these things are risks, and you have to predict them, preempt that this risk can happen. So because if you are at the forefront, then your competitors in predicting this risk is going to be there, then you can take total advantage of the fact and have very rapidly a solution for that than your competitors. So apply the risk management assessment techniques. So identify, again the same thing, determine the causes, sources of risk, investigate effectiveness of controls, understand consequences and likelihood, analyze interactions and dependencies, and provide a measure of risk. So measure metric is very important, because somebody has said that if you cannot measure, you cannot improve. So once you establish a risk management in your organization, you have to measure it again, measure how many outages were there, how many incidents happened during this quarter, that type of thing. Was there any security incident that took place? So all those things are parameters or measurement of the effectiveness of your risk management system. So identifying risk covers uncertainty. So you have to basically deal with uncertainty from inside as well as outside, depending on the context and scope of assessment. So what uncertainty exists and what its effects might be, what circumstances or issues can have future consequences, what sources of risk are present, what controls are in place in your organization at this moment, and whether they are effective or not according to you. And if they are not, do something about that. So what, how, when, where, and why events or consequences occur, what has happened in the past. So past precedents are very important indicators of the level of risk within the organization. If fire has occurred 3 times in the past 3 years, then that means you have not done anything about it, and how it may relate to the future, and which human aspects and organization factors might apply. So which human aspects and organizational factors might apply. So so to say that if you can identify risk on time, you can mitigate it on time, and you can do some damage reduction. Damage reduction means you can minimize your loss. Again, determining sources, causes, and drivers of risk. What is it that causes the risk? Which is the source? You have to eliminate the source of risk and the drivers of risk. If there is 3 fires in 3 years, then please change your office if it's a rented one also, and otherwise also you have to seriously think what is the vulnerability, because vulnerability is always with the asset. If the asset is vulnerable, then risk will definitely materialize, because the very definition of risk is that when a threat exploits vulnerability, risk comes into picture. So if threat is there and vulnerability, that employee there in that example was vulnerable, and because your organization had this vulnerability, that is why the risk materialized. So remember that. Then treatment we have seen, either you accept or modify or mitigate, or you transfer or you share. Assist in determining early warning indicators. As in the last slide, the minute you identify and there is a warning indicator, as you have experienced of late, all the storms and other things that hit Bengal and other places recently, that they had early warning indicators and everybody was evacuated. You can't do much about the trees and houses sometimes, but human life is the most precious and you have to do everything to safeguard that. So early warning indicators for natural disasters goes to save human life, and that is a very good thing. Determine common causes which can help develop the priorities for treating risk. Sources of risk include events, decisions, actions, and processes, favorable or unfavorable. Because you know now that risk can be positive, risk can be negative. So many applications cancelled for China in India laid a basis for a positive risk materializing for Indian IT companies to make those software. So one man's distress is another man's opportunity sometimes, and that is why we call risk as both positive as well as negative. So effectiveness of existing controls. The risk is affected by overall effectiveness of any control. The mechanism by which controls are intended to modify risk, whether controls are in place, capable of operating as intended, whether there are any shortcomings in design of controls. Because if your design of controls itself is faulty, then there can't be any control which can result out of it, or there can be gap. So whether there are gaps in controls, and from time to time you have to perform a gap analysis to find out the gaps and to mitigate those gaps. Factors, conditions, vulnerabilities, circumstances that reduce, as I said, you can reduce the threat. You can reduce the threat from materializing by having a resilient infrastructure. If your infrastructure is resilient, if you have taken both the vaccinations, for example, the myth is that you will not develop COVID. So that is the thing. You have to take all the protective measures that you can or are available. After that, if something happens, then you have to prepare for that also, but then you are safe. Whether controls themselves introduce additional risks. Analyze the types of consequences, and types of consequences, as well as I should say value of those consequences, because your prioritization of risk will happen only on the basis of the dollar value of loss. So value for consequences uncertain, consequence vary depending on circumstances and parameters that affect. So everything is variable, yet you have to come across a good estimation of the risk. Only then you can say that we can prioritize this first number I will treat, second number, third number, fourth number. So based on the dollar loss, you will prioritize. And that is how the management will do it, because this decision is going to be from the management. And management will not be interested much in how you have done it, but they say, okay, what is the risk and how much will I lose if I this risk materializes? Okay, this much. Then you say, okay, I will take immediate action against 1, 2, and 6, and others we will do after 2 months. That can also be one of the decisions, but that decision has its root into the dollar value of the loss. So your estimation of the loss has to be proper. And of course, analyze the likelihood of the occurrence. What is the probability, frequency? So likely, highly unlikely. So that should also be a part of your analysis. And of course, verifying and validating the results. So always a peer-to-peer validation is always necessary. Before you present anything to the management, come to a consensus as far as the whole team is concerned. Check the scope of the analysis, review all critical assumptions, check appropriate methods, models, and data that you have used. Use multiple methods. See, sometimes, you arrive at one conclusion from one assumption and method. Try it out from another method also and see if the same type of conclusion is used. That also validates your assumption. Check validity of your mathematical manipulation. If you have done a quantitative, please check out your mathematical calculations also. Check that results are insensitive to the way data results are displayed. So results should be normal, no matter you present in spider diagram, or you present in a Excel sheet or in a PowerPoint, anything. So you must be able to depend on the results. Compare results with past experience. Establish whether results are sensitive to the way data are displayed or not. Sometimes, a very smart young person will just, represent in a very smart way, but doesn't serve the purpose because the data is not representative. comparing results with past is very good thing to do, because I always ask for past reports. I always interrogate on past incidents, because I know the type of incidents that are taking place in the organization. So then planning becomes a lot easier. And of course, lastly, records is your risk register, communicate information, record and justification of the rationale. Your risk criteria is also record, track performance and trends, management reports are there for risk, enable verification of the risk assessment, who has done it, has the auditor done it or internal auditor has done it, and provide an audit trail. You should have substantial, substantial evidence. And then you have to, just as any other system, you have to integrate risk system also in the existing business activities. They should take it in their stride. They should accept the risk no longer should be a separate exercise. It should be embedded within the uh, main fold of the organization. So information used by executives and board members, compiling and managing list of risks, that's the list track, threat stack I was talking about. The need for strategy can be emphasized. Now, threat stack also you can, go by if you want to know what risks are there around in and around you. There are many reports from international agencies that give you top 10 risks from for 2021 or so on. So they have been releasing. So you see if any of those risks are also applicable to you. So finally, this ISO 31000 had its base in 2009, and then 2018 versions emerged. So there are 5 differences between 2009 and 2018. One is new simplified language with purpose statements. Technical terms and definitions were reduced from 29 to 8. Only value creation and protection, 8 new principles which we saw earlier. Then total integration across all employees, across all activities. After your risk management system is made, you are integrating it into the organizational system so that it works seamlessly. Leadership from management, because without that nothing can happen. Management has to commit resources, management has to commit the time as well as the people. Risk management is an iterative process, continuous process, and continuous improvement. So if you see the risk management process in a typical IT company, it would be like this. There's a logical flow to the process. Okay. All security requirements, external review, risk-based security tests. An organization can implement risk management in any part of the organization. There's logical flow. This has been repeated. Thank you. Questions?